Hey all, hi Sneaky Pew Pew here again. Today we're going to show you how to make a quadcopter, and we're going to show you a couple things like how to make a dead zone for it so you're not always fighting left and right when you're trying to fly straight. And we'll go over some PID usage to balance your blades so you kind of keep level in the air. It makes it easier to fly, especially in the wind. Yeah, so that's it. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, first things first, we're going to start with a chassis, right? So you can do an X or you can do an H. We're going to do an H for this just so we have those legs of the H to kind of put some microcontrollers on and just display them out real easy for you to see, easier to understand visually. So we'll go ahead and we'll start that and you try to catch up and I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so this is what I got. I have two legs here in the middle. I'm going to use these for a compact pilot seat and a small engine, which I have not used yet, but hopefully it'll be strong enough to lift this. Um, so go ahead and hook up all your pipes, your radiator, all that stuff. Get your engine running, put a throttle in there somewhere, a starter, so on and so forth. Just make sure that you try to keep it relatively center mass, or at least symmetric, so you're pushing off in both directions, left and right, with equal weight. And then we're going to work on getting the tail rotors in here, which we're going to use the tail rotors because we're able to turn the blades on them to give us a positive one, which is it'll lift us, and a negative one, which will make us come down. So we'll be able to adjust our altitude with a separate throttle and just go up and down, right? And then the PID, which we'll get into, will help kind of keep us balanced uh, in the meantime. So you go ahead and hook that up and we'll move on to the next step. All right, so I got my throttles hooked up. I got my engine hooked up. Everything's hooked up on my powertrain. I did it in yellow pipes. I could have easily went through the blocks, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea, make it as clear as possible. So the way I hook my throttles up, I got this one is just going to control it's going to be just the throttle basically on. It starts at 1, its max value is 1, and if you turn it down, it's just going to turn it off, right? So it's going to turn the engine off. Here's your starter, basic starter. We can label that. And this is my altitude set. So 100 is plenty for this game. We could even do, 50. That would be plenty to test because we're just going to float off the ground a little while for most of these maneuvers that we're configuring. Start value is 17, so 14, 13 is roughly ground level in this game. I'm not sure if it's meters or what, but 17 it would be right up here-ish, where the propeller would be. So we'll try to get that at a neutral value. Otherwise, as soon as we start it up, if that value say was 25, as soon as we start it up, those propellers are going to be spinning full force, and we don't want to fly into the air. So 17 is good. 15 gives us an option to come back down again, right? Otherwise, we're just going to go up in the air and we're going to float, and there's going to be no way to really come back down once we turn the engine off. So let's try that. And what we can do now is we can install our rotors. And we're going to do that with a robotic pivot power. Okay, so we're going to have 3 on each corner. There's going to be one that controls A and D, which is going to be your left strafe and your right strafe. There's going to be a second one that will control your forward and your back momentum or movement, so you can actually go forward and go back. And then there's going to be one that's only responsive to the input from the seat here. It's going to be the X look. So basically when you're flying in first person, if you look right, it translates that to a number value and we'll put it into the propeller or this robotic pivot arm and it'll turn us. So the front 2 would turn right. We'll invert the signal to the back 2 so that way they go left and then we just basically spin in place. Now this will cause a problem because there's no way to control the spin. If we stop looking to the right and we look straight forward, we're just going to spin for, a long time. So we have to figure out how to control that. Additionally, if you're using the X look, it's impossible to find zero, like right in front of you. So if you're flying a first person, every micro movement you make with your mouse, this is going to read it and it's going to translate that to a turn. So you're going to be turning left and right and constantly battling. So we'll have to set up a dead zone as well, and I'll show you how to do that. But first things first, let's get these robotic pivot arms set up, and I'll show you real quick how it's supposed to look. All right, there you have it. So I did these color coded so you can follow along easier, but basically yellow, orange, and red. Red being the outermost. So yellow again would be A and D if you're straight left and right. Orange is going to be your frontwards and backwards, or W and S, and the red one will be your X look, which is tied to the seat. We'll go ahead and hook the propellers up, and then we'll see if we can make this thing fly. All right, so with the propellers on, we're going to have to set up our movement. So we're going to set up our forward back, our WS, our left and right A and D, so straights, and then we're going to set up our turn with our look. We're going to start with the closest, which is going to be our A and D. So we'll go ahead and just connect these. So A and D, got to find it in here somewhere. A and D to the first one. Run it. And you'll be able to see, uh-oh, we need some inversion. Because these are on opposite corners and they've rotated all the way around. Some of them just don't act like you want them to. So what do we know it works? If we press right, we want to go right. So the front left is right, and the back right is right. So we need to adjust the front right and the back left because they're inverted. So we just got to place an inverter. If you don't know how to make an inverter, I can open this up and show you. It's really easy. I suggest you make one and save it for later. It's basically just you just take an input value and you just do an expression where the x is the first variable. It's only one variable here. You times it by -1 and then you output it. It's that easy. So what we'll do is we will change the front right and the back left. We'll push those into an inverter and we'll run that. All right, so if we go right, oh, look at that, strafe and right, strafe and left. Now we're going to set up next order of business. So what's the next pivot for? Well, it's going to move front ways and back ways, right? So that's how it's going to rotate. So we'll just do W and S. We'll just tie W and S to it. Loop, loop. Loop, loop. All right, so next thing we'll do is we're going to hook up the third in the chain here on each corner. And that's going to be our X look. We'll just hook that right on up. And we'll test it out. A lot of testing with this, you know, especially in the fine-tuning portion of it. So we got our front, we got our back, we got our right, we got our left. Now what happens when we look? Okay, we're going to need some inversion here. The front left one is correct. The back left one is correct. The other two need to be inverted. We'll just add another inverter. So front left one was correct. The back left one was correct. So we'll just invert the right side here. Run it. All right. Got front, back, right, left, and turning. That's what we want. And we'll just spin in place. Why don't you leave me a comment in the comments and tell me what your favorite part of this game is. Do you enjoy rescuing people more? Do you enjoy the challenge of having to build something to rescue? Or are you like me where you're just like, I want to make something really cool and I'm going to make it work really well? That's kind of where I strive personally. But yeah, go ahead and leave me a comment. So we'll move on to the next order of business here. We are going to set a pivot limit on these propellers because, as you saw before, they kind of just pivot all the way 20, like, well, plus 25 and minus 25, which is a literal 90-degree. And that is really dangerous in the air. So you don't want to be doing that, right? So I've set up some pre-configured limiters here. And I'll open these up and I'll show you how they work. But first we're going to try to add some more weight on the opposite side here. Add 2 of those in. And if you want to see how these work, basically just going to take, this is just a label by the way, it's just going to take the input and it's going to clamp it between, what works for me is around 0.20. Just depends on what part you're doing. For the forwards and backwards of the W and the S, the front one specifically, it helps to have a little bit more range. So, 0.25 instead of 0.18. But for everything else, 0.18 seems to be a good middle ground. Otherwise, you do too slow or you do too fast, and then things can get really out of hand really quickly. And if you're up in the air, you're looking at destroying your whole vehicle, and that's not ever good. So, yeah, just clamp it and then put it into an output. It's that easy. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have to pass all these output signals from A and D through the pivot limiter first. So we'll just disconnect this one, disconnect this one. Do these 2 at a time for stuff that's inverted so we don't get confused, because it gets real easy to get confused. Just pass it through an input limiter, and then from the input limiter, go out to the same pieces. And now from A and D to the inverter, we can break that connection, and we can just pass that to the inverter. Okay, so we have it going into the pivot limiter, then it goes out to the front left, back right, into the inverter for the other 2, and that should do it. So let's try that out. We're going to do little bitty steps here, because if you do a bunch of them at once and then you mess something up, it's harder to go back and figure out which one you messed up, especially when there's 6 variables. So what we were looking for is pivot right and a pivot left. So our A and D. Okay, those look pretty good to me. So that's working fine. Back to our pivot limiters. Okay, so what we'll do is we will take the input from WS rather, which goes to all of them. Doesn't have to go through an inverter, so this will be really easy for us. And we'll just pass that through pivot limiter. We'll take it off all the rest. And we'll take it right out from that limiter, right back into them. We're breaking all the connections we had. There's no inversion. All right, so pivot limiter, right, left still works. Front, there's our limit. Back, there's our limit. All right, the last one we're going to do is the look, and we'll just make sure that the X look is passed through a pivot limiter as well. For this, we're just going to, I mean, we could minimize the amount of inverters we have and pivot limiters, but just for tutorial purposes, we're just going to keep adding them as we need them, okay? So pass X look. This goes to the left and goes to the right. We'll take those off. We'll pass them into that, pass them back. All right, too easy. Now, add one that went into an inverter on this side. And then it goes out. So what we'll have to do is take it off of the inverter. Instead, pass this to the inverter. And that should work. All right, so still good there, good there, good there, good there. All right, we're not going to turn a whole lot. We're going to turn enough. Creation's looking pretty colorful at this point. Okay, so now we got our limits set up, and one thing you'll notice if we go into first person is that you can see these are reacting even slightest movements right and left. That's a problem, right? Because if you're flying, you're just going to be fighting that all the way. You're going to be flying to the right, flying to the left. And then, you know, in the air, these things aren't as responsive. So what's going to happen is you're going to go to the left and you're going to try to fight it to the right, and you're going to overcorrect. And then you're going to be fighting to the left again. You're going to overcorrect, so on and so forth. It's a never-ending battle. So what we want to do is we want to set up a dead zone. Now, this is going to be just basically how it works. If we're looking straight forward on the vehicle, let's say right here in front of you is 0, right? Then as you go to the right, it's going to be plus. Then as you go to the left, it's going to be negative. That's how these things work, you know, plus 25 and negative 25. So we're going to want to clamp the values of output from XLOOK into a certain range. And we can do that with a microcontroller, as you probably guessed. Now I've already got one set up here, but we'll go into it and I'll show you exactly how it works. So it's going to be our microcontroller for our XLOOK Deadzone with spin correction. Okay, so another issue that we're going to have is that once you start spinning, you're just going to keep spinning until it slowly, you know, gradually comes back down. But that's a problem because if you're just wanting to steer yourself, you want to steer that way and then stop. So this will also do that. All right, so inside of this Deadzone controller, we have actually two pieces. There is the speed correction, basically. It's a PID controller. We're not going to get into that. That's this threshold at the bottom and these guys here. We'll just talk about this. So this is XLOOK value. This is the input from the XLOOK on your seat. It's going to go straight in. It's going to come into a threshold of negative 0.9 to positive 0.9. You can see it there. That being negative 0.9 to the left, positive 0.9 to the right. Okay. Now, if it was in that threshold, so if you're looking straight forward, it would be on. So we need to reverse that and turn it off. So this numerical switch box, which is going to pass the final output, it's going to turn off. So it's not going to pass your XLOOK value if you're in the middle there. That's your dead zone. That should work perfect. The rest of this is going to be the opposite, basically. You know, it's going to, if it's outside of this threshold or if it's in this threshold, it turns the PID controller on. So that way, while you're in the dead zone, the machine is gonna correct your spin. Okay, we're not going to get into this portion just yet, but I mean this is almost enough of an explanation. We'll revisit it later once we get the speed sensor, but we're not going to be able to test any of that out until we actually get in the air and we can spin, and I can show you the difference between having one and not having one. So for now, we will concentrate on getting this baby off the ground. All right, so we're going to focus on getting this baby off the ground for right now. The way that we're going to have to do that is we're going to have to take these propellers And I'm going to give them 6 blades with a neutral pitch. It's always nice to have neutral because you can add and you can take away. It just doesn't start out with positive. 6 blades should do it. The way that I understand it, the more blades, the more grip you pretty much have to go up or down. If you chalk it down to like 3 blades, you might have trouble getting off the ground, to be honest. Just depends on how heavy your rig is. So, but what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pass a value input to these. So what we'll do is we'll pass some input into a PID. So this is not only going to control our up and down, because we could just pass up and down and left and right, probably up and down. Where's it at? Up and down right here. We could pass this into those and just control the up and down. For testing purposes, that would work. Great, but why not just put the PID in place so that these are going to balance for us anyways? If we're going to be in the air, we might as well be in there the best way possible. That's just balance. So what I've done is I've created some PIDs, and I'll show you here. Now you can actually go into the inventory here, and you can find a PID, just like this. What I don't like about these PIDs is watch what happens when you put one down. They got a little logo on them, and I don't like that at all because you can't paint over it. Maybe they'll patch that later. Maybe, they'll figure out a way that you can edit the look of this. I haven't figured out how to do it. So what I've done is I've just created my own. And I can show you when you click on the regular one from the inventory, you get these proportional gain, integral gain, derivative gain, max value, right? For mine, we can name it for which corner we want it, and then we can add the fields. And I can show you in here how I did that, because we're going to have to open it up anyways. So I'll show you here. So all you have to do is take a property text. You can find it as one of the things, and just place it in there, and that'll give you can say whatever you want, and then just leave a value of 0 for so you can name it later. The throttle in set point is going to be an input, and that's going to be an input. And then here's where you set those property values that are tied directly to the PID controller, because it has an in for proportional gain, integral gain, and derivative gain. All you got to do is label them appropriately. You can set them as a default. This is typical. 0.1 proportional is a typical good starting point. There's some YouTube tutorials out there about the PID if you really want to get into it, or just, like I said, Wikipedia it. And then that's going to go out to your propeller. Yeah, so it's just that simple. So what we'll do is we'll hook up each of these corners, and we have our value set already. So we can just altimeter input variable. So, we don't have an altimeter. So let's get our altimeters. Let's get those on there. We'll put one on each corner. And on the inside corner, right there. All right, so we got our altimeters, and we will feed those. Actually, let's just zoom in here, and we'll feed this altimeter into altimeter input variable. This is why you label your microcontrollers. Throttle in set point, okay. So remember in the beginning we had this throttle here that we configured. Throttle on, throttle off. And we have this one for the altitude set. So we're going to feed output to the throttle in set point. And we're going to do the same thing we just did for all of these. Throttle in set point. We'll do throttle in set point. Be careful not to attach to the wrong one here. I have a whole lot of problems. Throttle in set point, and then we'll attach our little altimeters. Altimeter there, and our altimeters But we'll take our output and we're going to put it to the propeller. All right, so we've hooked up all of our PIDs to our blades, and we're going to test it out. I'm going to go open the garage door and see if we can get it flying. All right, moment of truth. Ease up on the throttle. Oh, looks like we got liftoff. Go forward a little bit. The third person here. I think we can figure that pretty well. Maybe we can come up a number. I'm just close enough to the ground here. I'm smacking it. So we'll come up a little bit. And you can see here, my spin correction is not working because I haven't hooked it up yet. So I want to illustrate that problem I was talking about before. See, we just get to spinning, then you look back forward again. What's going on? We're just going to spin forever. Well, not forever, but, long enough. Might get sick. So what we'll do is we'll configure that here in a minute. But what I wanted to illustrate for you is that how stable I am. I am spinning. That's a different issue. And our Deadzone does work here. You get about right here, and it kicks in. But I'm not falling over, which is good. And if I go like this, you see how it's balancing itself out while I power forward and not just dumping me on my face? We can go back, we can do the same thing. Alright, so I've fine-tuned a little bit these robotic pivots. I've changed them all to 1:4 ratio because they were a little sluggish in the air, I noticed. So that's done. Now we're going to add our angular speed sensor. You can add it wherever you want, really. I like to just put mine somewhere in center. And then we'll connect it up to the input from speed sensor on this. And that should be all you need. And if you need to review this one more time, I'll let you take a screenshot or whatever you need to do. But it's basically just a PID. It's got the same value passed to the same threshold, but this time we want the threshold to turn the PID on, not off. Whereas before it was turning this whole switch box off. And then it gets its input from the spin sensor that feeds into the process variable. And then the constant number of 0 as a set point. And that's all. That's it. That's all there is to it. So we'll go ahead and we'll test this. All right, start it up. Got our altitude. There we go. That's much more responsive. Okay, let's get this flying. All right, so once we get out here in the open, we'll bring it up a little bit, maybe even higher than that. Yeah, this small engine is struggling right now. It's not able to get much further than my altitude's too high for it. That's what's going on. We're gonna come back down. Let's make a landing real quick. Make a landing. I don't know why the game does that, where your legs go through the ground sometimes. We'll just go ahead, we'll lift off. We'll just scrape on the ground here. We got a small engine, it's okay. Alright. Alright, so what we'll do here is we're going to just test our spin sensor correction. Remember before we spun and it just wouldn't stop. Let's see what happens. Just like that. Spin sensor works. It's flying as good as it can with a small engine. You might try switching up the number of blades here, but I don't think we're going to get too far. We do 5 blades, maybe, and still get off the ground. I mean, we don't have a lot, so it's pretty light. That might work. I think 4 blades is the lowest I've ever gotten off the ground with, and I don't think I could get very high. Now you see the blade pitch there when I go down on the altitude set, the blade pitch changes. Isn't that pretty cool? I would have set that to right about what looks like enough lift to just lift us off a tiny bit or keep us where we're at. Just you can always turn the sensitivity on these throttles down if you just end up smacking into the ceiling, like I've done so many times before. We're gonna go ahead and we're landed. I'm gonna go ahead and get some lift here. See if that kind of corrected it. Are we able to get? Nope. So I have to say. So don't use a small engine. You know, it'd be too easy to change that out though. Yeah, we got our spin here. It's correcting. We got our dead zone. No turns happening until we get to about right there. There it is. What I've done on my other one is, you know, the configuration is a little bit different, but on this front piece here, and on this front piece, I just put a little red dot there and a red dot there on the edges of my threshold, so I can just look at the dot and I know it's going to turn me. And there you have it. You have a working, very, very weak, but working, in balancing, spin stabilization, you've got a dead zone configured, and you got your PID. It's going to balance you guys out. So you have everything you need to make a quadcopter. If you enjoyed the tutorial, smack the like, hit subscribe. I'm going to be trying to make more tutorials based on things that I can't find information for, or cool things that I just tinker around with. If you have anything that you like to see me create or work out for you, absolutely leave a comment, and I'll try to see if it's something I can figure out and make a tutorial for. I hope you guys have a good night, a good day, and we'll see you next time.